Why does everything these days seem to be about AI? Every founder is building with it. Every investor wants exposure to it. Every company suddenly has an AI strategy. It might seem like AI is the newest wave, like so many others before it, but there's something real behind it. In the first half of 2026, Indian technology startups raised more money than they did a year earlier, even as the number of funding rounds fell sharply. Investors were writing fewer checks, but making much larger bets. And the lion's share of these bets went to companies building the infrastructure behind artificial intelligence. NASA, an Indian AI infrastructure company, raised $600 million. Nextra, which operates data centers, raised $710 million. Along with Cred, these three deals accounted for nearly one-third of all the startup capital raised during the period. This is not another story about AI hype. It is an exploration into what is driving growth, what investors believe India should build next, and where the country's next generation of founders may find its biggest opportunity. Welcome back to another episode of One Big Bite, where we explore critical stories shaping India's future. I'm your host, Ananya. Let us begin with an interesting contradiction. Indian technology startups raised about $7.2 billion between January and June 2026. That was 12% more than during the same period last year. But the number of funding rounds fell by 43%. The ecosystem attracted more capital, but that capital reached fewer companies. This tells us that investors are changing how they place their bets. During the previous startup boom, funds often backed a wide range of young companies, knowing most would fail but hoping a few would become very big. Now the approach is more selective. Investors are concentrating money in businesses that already have scale, proven demand, or technology they believe will become difficult to replace. The data shows that AI and deep tech startups are attracting much of this confidence. Indian AI startups raised $676 million in the first half of 2026, more than 4 times what they raised during the same period a year earlier. Advanced hardware companies attracted $365 million. India's private space sector raised about $113 million during the year, taking its cumulative equity funding since 2021 close to $900 million. This growth reveals that investors are seeing the sector as the next major source of value. NASA is building the computing system businesses need to train and deploy AI models. Sarvam AI is developing foundation models designed around Indian languages and use cases. Space startups are working on launch systems, satellite technology, and services built from Earth observation data. The common thread is not simply that these companies use advanced technology. It is that they are attempting to build foundational technologies that other companies may eventually depend on. India's startup ecosystem used to be dominated by businesses that made existing activities faster or more convenient. The emerging opportunity is to build the underlying capability itself. Over the past 15 years, Indian startups changed everyday life. Digital payments became routine. Shopping and entertainment moved online. Entire consumer categories were reorganized through apps. That transformation proved that Indian companies could build for millions of users and operate at enormous scales. But many of these companies were built on technologies developed elsewhere. They used imported chips, global cloud platforms, foreign operating systems, and software infrastructure controlled by companies outside of India. The next startup cycle gives India an opportunity to move further down the technology stack. Instead of only building the service a consumer sees, Indian companies can build the systems that make the service possible. That includes computing infrastructure for AI, semiconductor design, industrial robotics, energy storage technology, and space-based data services. These companies are harder to build than a conventional software startup. They may require years of research before reaching the market. Their founders may need laboratories, specialized equipment, or regulatory approvals. Early revenue can take time, but the value they create can travel far beyond one company. A semiconductor design company can create intellectual property used across global supply chains. An AI infrastructure patch. An AI infrastructure business can support hundreds of other startups. A satellite company can provide information for agriculture, logistics, or disaster response. A robotics company can create machines that boost productivity and reduce human exposure to hazardous work. This is why the movement of startup capital matters even if you are not planning to become a founder. Investment determines which companies grow, but its stakes go far beyond it. It influences which industries attract engineers, which research ideas become commercial products, and which technology India builds for itself. The companies funded now could become a part of India's infrastructure economy. The immediate result has been a flood of AI pitch decks. Many founders take an ordinary product, add an AI feature, and present it as a frontier tech company. Some founders build truly original deep tech. Investors will need to distinguish between the two. That means founders are likely to face harder questions. Does the business own any deep technology? Is the product difficult to copy? Will customers pay for it without endless discounts? Can the company move from a compromising demonstration to reliable execution? This may make fundraising more demanding. That is not necessarily a bad thing. A mature startup ecosystem should reward more than rapid user growth and an impressive valuation. It should also reward defensible technology, clear demand, and the ability to solve a difficult problem well. This could change who becomes a founder. A manufacturing engineer may understand exactly where a factory loses time and money. A doctor may know why an existing diagnostic system repeatedly fails patients. A scientist may recognize that a useful invention is sitting inside a laboratory because nobody has worked out how to turn it into a product. The next generation of successful companies may be built by people who have spent years inside an industry rather than those eyeing the next trendy category. Expertise becomes an advantage because the most valuable opportunities may arise from the gaps and problems that are not immediately visible from the outside. They may also sit between sectors. An agriculture startup could combine satellite data with crop science. A factory automation company might use computer vision. A healthcare company could build a diagnostic device supported by Indian language AI. The real opportunity then is not to start an AI company simply because investors are interested in AI. It is to identify where a new technology can solve an expensive or persistent problem better than the existing tools. That is a more difficult starting point. It is also more likely to produce a company that lasts. India has already begun putting policy support behind this shift. The India AI mission has an outlay of more than $1.05 billion and is expanding access to the high-performance computing needed to develop and deploy AI models. More than 38,000 graphics processing units were onboarded under its shared compute program by March 2026. The private space sector has a dedicated venture fund and support for the commercial adoption of new technologies. Startup India's second fund of funds has a proposed corpus of $1.05 billion with deep technology and innovative infrastructure among its priorities. India has also announced a $10.48 billion research, development, and innovation scheme intended to support technology-led growth over 6 years. The architecture is beginning to take shape. The challenge now is to make it useful to founders. Frontier technology companies need capital that matches the time the products take to develop. A consumer application can reach the market within months. A semiconductor or biotechnology company may spend years testing and refining its technology. If both are judged on the same timeline, founders will be pushed towards ideas that produce quick results rather than lasting capabilities. India also needs to become a better first customer. Many young companies are building products for public health, agriculture, defense, and climate resilience. Government agencies could provide them with early demand and a real environment in which to prove that their technology works. but procurement remains difficult for small firms. Clearer pilot programs and faster contracting could help startups move from prototypes to credible businesses. Research institutions must also become easier places from which to launch companies. A scientist should be able to access patent support, commercial advice, and testing facilities without having to navigate the process alone could become the blueprint for a supportive ecosystem. Shared infrastructure will be equally important. Most young teams cannot afford advanced laboratories, large computing systems, or aerospace testing facilities. Access to common resources can help founders validate an idea before seeking a large investment. AI is receiving attention because it can reshape existing industries. The same applies to space technology, robotics, and advanced hardware. Their value will ultimately be judged by whether they help India produce better products, strengthen essential systems, and build capabilities it currently imports. India's startup market is not running out of money. It is becoming more particular about where that money goes. India's startup market is not running out of money. It is becoming more particular about where that money goes. The largest bets are moving towards deep tech startups, businesses that own technology, build infrastructure, or operate in sectors that could shape India's long-term economic position. Some of these companies will fail. That is inevitable when founders attempt something technically difficult. The important question is whether India creates an ecosystem in which serious teams can take those risks without being forced to chase quick results. So the next time you see a startup announce a huge funding round, look past the size of the check and what the company is actually building. Does it solve a real problem? Could another businesses depend on it? Does it give India a capability it did not have before? Because the defining startup of India's next economic cycle may not be the one that makes an everyday task slightly easier. It may be the one that allows the country to build something it previously could not. That is the episode of One Big Bite. I'm Ananya. Thank you for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one.